but you can probably hear in my accent that I'm American. If you know America, you hear also in my accent that I'm from the American South. So we're considered slower in America, but apparently a little better fit for here. I live in Nashville, Tennessee, which if you know the states as well, you know that's sort of, we call Nashville Jerusalem. All of the Christian publishing, Christian music industry, a lot of denominational headquarters, our coaching and consulting ministry, all of that's sort of headquartered in Nashville. My role in the church, I'll just give very quick overview. I was trained as an attorney, not as a pastor. I lived in Louisiana. I've traveled, my wife was with me last week in Australia, traveled around the country, and I was looking for a Louisiana corollary, like so that I could tell everybody in, kind of your context where I'm from, and I couldn't really find one. So Louisiana is like where nobody wants to go. And I was telling that to Al Stewart, and he said, well, I'm sure it's probably very pretty though. And I said, no, it's not even pretty. Nobody wants to go there. Everybody leaves. So yesterday, walking through the lobby here was a lady in an LSU, Louisiana State University sweatshirt. And I said, what are you doing? I'm from LSU. And she said, well, you and I left like everybody else. So that's where I'm from. Very rural, not a lot. They call it the leadership drain. Everybody leaves when they can. But when I was still living there, I was an attorney, and I had the privilege of seeing the Lord start a church at my law firm. We were gathering mostly as a small group, and it grew from about 8 people to about 140 in spite of what we were doing. We had no idea what we were doing. And that group eventually was the group that I left the practice of law in order to go and pastor. So that's sort of where the Lord redirected my life. The way that I got into this area of work, leading multiple congregations, which is what I do now full time. I'm a coach and consultant for the church in this area. Is our church was approached, this is still in Louisiana, we were approached by another church who we were about, at the time we were about 400 or 500 people. We were meeting right on a college campus, and we were in another church's gym. That was where we were meeting. And so we didn't have a building, and we also didn't have enough chairs. We had students just kind of sitting on the floor. And this other church approached us. They had just built a really nice building with like 700 seats, and they'd lost their pastor through a moral failure. And that rather than hire another pastor, they asked, would you consider adopting us, and you could have our building and meet here, and we could all join up together. I was very concerned at the time that our students, because we were right on the college campus, many of them walked to our facility, wouldn't go with us if we all just moved over to this new church further away. So I started researching and exploring, is there a way to do one church in multiple locations? And I found out there's this whole kind of expertise around multi-site church that I knew nothing about. So I called and got myself a consultant, a guy that started Multi-Site Solutions. He walked with me for about 18 months and taught me how to navigate our church, not through all moving to one new building that we would have been given through this merger, but how to do church across 2 locations. As we became friends, this would have been in about 2006 or 7, as we became friends, he asked me to consider serving on his team of consultants. And then more recently, about 4 or 5 years ago, he asked me to move to Nashville and be his successor. So we have about 10 consultants that do this full time. Well, no, that's not true. Almost all of our work, like I'll share some data and things like that, is going to come from the American context because that's what we know best. Part of what I'm learning is how much of that's transferable to other cultures and how much of that's purely American and doesn't have much application in other places. We teach, Jim is in London and Berlin the same time I'm here. Last spring I was in France and Greece, so we teach all over. And as we do that, we learn what really is transferable across all cultures, or at least across similar cultures, and what is uniquely American. So we're getting better at that each year as we go. I've been traveling across your country to learn this even more, visiting churches. I've visited churches of all sizes, from house churches all the way up to churches of 2,000 people. I've been in Melbourne and Sydney, and will be in Newcastle again. I've been up to Cairns. I haven't gotten too far out toward Perth. So if any of you are Adelaide, sorry, I didn't get to see you this trip. But I've learned a lot from churches that are out those directions as I've met you this week. Scott Sanders, who kind of leads Geneva Push, he's become a good friend of mine. This is an area where I think he's exploring the multi-site model as a potential way to complement church planting where it's a good fit. So that's sort of a little bit about me and what I do. And what we're focused on today is preparing for and leading multiple congregations. Now, I've sat through a number of the sermons. I need to say this too. I was here for a pre-conference. There were about 60 people that were here for a multi-site consult before Multiply even started. So there were some churches that were a part of that came in just for that, and then there's some that stayed also for this. So I need to say right up front, were any of you here for the multi-site consult? All right, you may want to go to a different session because you're an expert. Could you, since you're the one that was there, could you offer any takeaways on that for me?
Yeah. I think the most helpful thing for us was really, we thought we were on a trajectory, like surely this is just the way to go, but particularly actually stopping and going, hang on, are we a healthy church that's in a place to start doing things like multi-site or church planting? Let's fix that first. Once we've got a good thing really going, then make it part of the 5-year plan. But
yes,
let's get that sorted out first.
So this is very encouraging for me to hear, and I want you guys to hear this too. I think there's sometimes a perception if a multi-site person is talking that their goal is to convince you to go multi-site. That's not actually my goal at all. My goal is to inform you around what multi-site is so that when you decide whether to do it or not, you're fully informed. That's my goal. So we spent 6 hours yesterday making these guys experts on the model, and then we're going to spend about an hour and a half summarizing as much of that as I can possibly fit in today. But he knows it all well, so I want to serve him well by freeing him up. I actually thought there might be a couple. Here's your other choices. But I just wouldn't want him to have to hear some of the same, it's not the same material, but some of the same concepts. So let me go before yes. Could you drop the screen? It's sitting on a pillow, so I'm assuming we can. It's not high tech. Oh, now that I don't know. Could you do me a favor? You know Gus. Could you ask Gus if he knows how to drop the white screen? Yeah, thanks. All right, let me ask just real quickly so I can get an idea of who's in the room. How many of you are leading in a place right now where there's more than one congregation, at least at one location? You with me? You've got more than one congregation, okay? How many of you have more than one congregation and more than one location? So a few. And how many of you are exploring this whole idea? All right, good. That helps me a lot. Now, give me quickly what would most help you in this time together, because there's the way I shared with the group yesterday. I want you to imagine that I have 100 hours of material on this, and I want to target this down to the hour that's going to be most helpful for everybody in the room. So as best you can, let me know if you know what questions would most help you. Yes.
What's the benefits about sticking together as kind of one group?
Yes.
Is there any benefits in going separate?
Yes. So multi-site versus church planting. I want to cover this. This is great.
So multiple personalities in congregations.
Yes. All right. Congregations being different from one another, but still being one church. Yes.
Legal implications and contractual agreements.
Yeah, legal implications. Good. Yes.
After my elders, John Deacon of Mark Dever's 9 marks.
Yes.
So I'm having to overcome some theological objections.
Yeah.
So what makes this one church rather than
So would they accept somebody, and I'm really asking this, somebody like John Piper as an authority? Or would that still be questioned?
Yes, it would still be questioned.
Okay.
So I'm convincing them that we need to go to 2 services, which would be a big
Yeah, that Mark would not even agree to that. Yeah. Okay. That may be a longer than this seminar, but we'll. It is far back. Yes. Most Mark Dever, do y'all say Dever or Dever? Either Dever. Okay. I get all my A's wrong in Australia. I guess, and every time they say no. So I tried to say data earlier, and they said, no, we say data. And I said, I sworn I heard somebody say data earlier. So Dever, most people who follow Mark Dever's sort of philosophy of church would stick to one service in one location with one leadership. So this is why he's saying that would be starting further back than most.
Feasibility with one pastor leading multiple congregations rather than multiple staff teams?
Yes, smaller church context is huge in Australia because most of the churches that I've interacted with as I've been here have been smaller as they've questioned this multi-site journey. I'm going to work my way across and then we'll come back to you two. There was one here and then here.
How does, I don't know if you're familiar with the EMS model?
Yes.
How does that apply as you start a new service in a new location?
Yep.
How do the EMS interact across 2 things?
Okay, how do the M's interact across locations? Yes?
Staffing for multi-site.
Yes.
Who you choose and that sort of
Perfect. There were 2 over here.
Mine's similar.
Okay, and then there was one left. Yes?
The kind of like the splitting pains.
Yeah.
Splitting the same service into 2 different services.
Yeah. All right, so to cover all that, I would really need 100 hours. I'd love to do it. This is, I'll just say it this way, take 2 minutes and say it this way. When Jim offered the opportunity for me to be his successor, one of the things that I was really wondering is the multi-site movement sort of over in America? While Jim was leading this, we saw this movement grow from 5 churches in the late 90s to 5,000 churches today in America are multi-site. One church, but more than one location. That doesn't mean multiple congregations on the same site. It means multiple sites. That's obviously what multi-site means, multiple locations. So 5,000 of these. There have been some movements that have sprung up over the last 40 years that in America really have sort of died. They're not died out, but the energy for them is no longer there. One of those that has sort of dribbled away is the mega campus. That doesn't get built anymore. Every year in America, the average size of our sanctuaries is getting smaller. Multi-site's a big reason for that. There used to be this movement in the 80s and 90s to build 3,000 seat auditoriums and 5,000 seat auditoriums. I'm just telling you, that doesn't exist anymore. So if you had invited me 5 years ago to go into the church building business, I would have said no. That's going the other direction. We're looking more at reclaiming old facilities and putting existing kingdom resources to work. That's an 80s and 90s model, building these big things. And I was wondering, is multi-site headed that same direction? And I think in some ways it is. In others, what's happening, and this is why I'm here in Australia, is it's starting to become a model for smaller and smaller churches. It was born out of the American megachurch. That's where it started. 1 church in 2 locations as a space remedy. But what is happening now over the last 10 years, and this is where almost all of my work is, it's starting to become much less about church growth and church expansion and much more about church reproduction. And there are a lot of similarities between multi-site and church planting. There are a lot of differences too. So I'm going to start there with the differences between multi-site and church planting. As I do that, we're going to draw the distinction first, and then I'll jump into this sort of leadership question. I want to say this. For your communities, this may be the most important thing I say. Your communities where you go and launch a new congregation do not care if it is multi-site or a church plant. Nobody is going to ask you whether this leadership structure is part of the same church or whether it's a new church. What they care about is there is a new congregation showing up in their community, and is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? This is just a mechanism. It's a way for getting a new congregation into a community. Are you with me? There's more than one way to do this. And some ways are a perfect fit in some instances and other ways in other instances. I just want you to know these ways. All right, this is going to be a little bit challenging for me to hold the mic and draw, but I'm going to give it a go. These are the three differences between church planting and multi-site. They all start with G. The first one is governance. There was this gathering of multi-site churches in America that asked, is there any way that we can just come up with a definition of what a multi-site church is? And it was really hard. It took 2 days. And Americans, we don't agree on anything. So that was a challenge in and of itself. But here's the definition that everybody finally did agree on. And it's governance. A multi-site church is one church across however many different locations you might have. It's at least 2, meeting under one leadership structure and one budget. Okay? That's a multi-site church. So governance in a multi-site church is one, and we'll just use the initials there and just pretend there's just 2 campuses. If you have 2 campuses, 2 locations in a multi-site church, you still just have one leadership structure if you're multi-site. If you have 2 locations and 2 leadership structures, it's a church plant. Okay? This is a very simple definition. If you have 7 locations and 1 leadership structure, you're multi-site. If you have 7 locations and they all have their own governance structure, it's church plants. Okay? They're all, yes?
What if you have 1 leadership structure, 1 location, but multiple congregations?
Yes, I would say 1 church. 1 leadership structure, 1 church. Yes. No. 1 location is not multi-site.
Even if it's 3
Yes.
functioning.
Yes, that's right. Because of 1 location. Yeah. Yes.
So a parish,
Yes. Yes.
you've got multiple congregations, but you've got a parish board, so you've got independent governing boards of each of those congregations.
Yes. If those boards have the final say for their location, then it's multi-site. Yes. I'm sorry, then it's individual churches. Sorry. Forgive me. There wasn't a question here?
Yeah, I was just thinking, so the church you're at is technically one governance.
Yep.
It's got their own congregational pastors, they have a lot of autonomy.
Yes.
So it's technically one governance, but...
Technically, one governance means it's multi-site. You're just delegating it to those locations. But if you could pull it back, it's one governance structure. You with me? Everybody? So here's what we often ask because there are some blurry gray areas with churches as they do this. We ask if something's going wrong on the campus, at the location, like a leader's teaching something that he shouldn't be teaching, that the church doesn't agree with. Do you have the authority to address that? Okay? If you do, you're functioning as a multi-site church. If all you can do is make suggestions, it's functioning as something independent. Y'all with me? It's a helpful diagnostic. So part of what we ask when churches are thinking about launching something new is, do you want to stay responsible for what goes on out there, or do you want to let it go? That's just a question. A lot of times pastors don't feel the freedom to ask these kinds of questions. But if you're going to launch something in a new community, do you want to stay responsible, accountable, to use the biblical word, for what's going on out there? Or would you rather let that go and it be self-governed on its own? That's one difference between multi-site and church planting. The next one is gifting. Now, whose gifting am I talking about here? What would be this? The lead pastor, his gifting certainly matters. What I'm referring to here is the gifting of the person that is being sent out. Okay? And here's the question that I would ask for that person. This pastor that is going to be sent out to launch something, do they want to reproduce your church? Or do they want to reproduce or launch their church? Okay? Multi-site reproduces your church. A church plant reproduces the church planters, or produces the church planters' church. Now, both require significant degrees of leadership. They are both campus pastors and church planters, high-level leaders. These are high-capacity leaders. It's not that a church planter's here and a campus pastor's here. In America, campus pastors are now, 87% of them are launched out of, in other words, they were raised up by the sending church because that's what's being reproduced. We often teach the best campus pastors in the world are people that you reached with your ministry, who saw their lives transformed by the gospel as a result of your ministry, who grew up and were discipled in your ministry, and who believe deeply in your ministry and want to go reproduce that somewhere else, okay? Now, it's not to say that you can't pull leadership in from somewhere else, but they're going to bring in their own ideas and their own sort of philosophies of ministry and what has impacted them, and you're going to have to work out, can they really reproduce who we are, or are they going to reproduce something different? Yes?
So are you saying, like, in my thinking, you would see a lot of cases of church planting in a sense that starts off multi-site, but then ends up morphing into church planting?
A lot, and nobody enjoys it. This is the tension we get from lead pastors and campus pastors all the time. Paul Harrington said this earlier in a session. He launched his first campus with a friend. And he said, because we were friends, I thought our friendship would carry the day. And we didn't work through all these details about what he really wanted to see happen and what I really wanted to see happen. We just thought friendship would work all that out. And you end up with all these things are muddy and our friendship's no longer there. And this is what happens with people who don't go through the details of, do you want to reproduce our church? Neither are bad. In other words, I'm not making a moral judgment that our church is better than your church. You know what I mean? There are instances where church planters genuinely want to reproduce their own or produce their own thing and need to be given permission to do that. That's okay. The trouble comes when you're thinking of it as a reproduction of your church and they're thinking of it more as what they want to see happen. Do you see the tension there? You all see that? This is where lead pastors invest enormous amounts of sideways energy into always pulling things back into the way the churches should be doing things. Should be, y'all with me? And the campus pastor feels like, I don't have any freedom. You're always telling me what to do. It's like, and so we jokingly we were talking about this dynamic in a church where this tension existed. It was obvious that this tension existed. And we kept using the term mother church. And one of the campus pastors who was feeling this tension very acutely said, you mean the Death Star? We just rotate around the Death Star and they shoot down everything we ever want to do. Every idea I ever have, they just shoot it down. And this is the point that we make in all of that, where you allow organizational tension to creep in, it will inevitably become personal tension. And clarity on the front end around gifting is incredibly important. Is somebody that you're sending out, now remember, we're talking about preparing for and leading multiple congregations. When you're talking about using the multi-site model, there needs to be no doubt in your mind and no doubt in the person who is being sent out, their mind, that you are reproducing the same church, okay? Not one that's kind of like it, but the same. We'll talk more about that in a minute. The last one is geography. And I'm actually I'm going to erase all of this if I don't think I have an eraser. I'll just do it on the side. Geography is I mentioned this to our consult yesterday, and we spent an enormous amount of time on this. If there were a secret formula of multi-site, it's geography. And I'm going to show you why. In the early days, remember I said this grew out of the mega church movement, mega campus movement. When they were out of room, they started launching these things and they were using video. It was sort of an overflow room in another spot. Some of those worked and some didn't. And then as this became more of a model of church reproduction, not just church growth, the same dynamic was observable. Some worked and some didn't. And here's one of the reasons why we really, really began to understand when some worked and when they didn't. I can't draw Sydney. I wish I could. I can't. I don't even know where I am right now with the harbor and all this. So the bridge. So this is a city that just is a hypothetical city. Okay, this is the city center, and we're going to say this is your church. All right. Now that may not be where your church is located in your community, and it's okay. I'm making a point. In every survey that I'm aware of, what we find consistently over and over and over again is that almost all the people at your church live within 20 to 30 minutes of your church. You can survey your congregation and you'll find this out too. It doesn't matter what size you are. It doesn't matter if you're urban, suburban, rural. There will be some exceptions if you're in a place where people either have to take public transport or have to drive long distances. But those are the very kind of ends of the spectrum. Most of the time what you'll find is that a very large number of people will live within 30 minutes of your church, as many as 90%. And then almost all of the remaining 10% of your people will live 20 to 30 minutes. So if this is inside 20, you could go out to 30 and you'll get almost everybody in your church. You'll have a few outliers, not very many, but you'll have a few. And what we've learned over the years is the further away somebody is from your church, the less likely they are to stay connected there long term. In other words, if they have to drive an hour and a half to come to your church on Sunday, it's very unlikely that they'll come back during the week. And it's more likely that they'll find somewhere else that's closer. So most parishes are about a 20-minute size. Yes?
So even a mega church doesn't get it really going?
They don't. They will for a season. If you have a big draw, like a big celebrity pastor, and people move to town and they're 45 minutes away, they'll come for a season. But they eventually will tire of that drive. And even if they do continue to drive on Sundays, they will really struggle to become a part of the congregation because that doesn't happen on Sundays in those big churches. It happens during the week.
And that doesn't affect if someone's used to driving an hour to work or like 20 demographics?
It can on the edges. There are very few communities where like the commute in is an hour and a half. But again, what we find even on those places is they don't want to do it on Sunday. If they're doing that every day of the week, they don't want to do it on Sunday. So yes, there are exceptions to every rule. But generally speaking, your church, all of the money that's given to your church, most of the volunteers that are at your church, all of the families that you're investing in at your church are going to be inside this circle. Yes, sir?
Does it vary between urban and rural?
It does, but not much. What happens is the circle gets bigger. It's less dense, but the 20-minute value doesn't change. Yeah. So here's what we've learned about multi-site. The ideal place to launch your first congregation through the multi-site model is in this sweet spot between 15 to 30 minutes where there's a community that you have a large number of people already attending your church from, a cluster of people, okay? And you can almost always identify one of these. A community about 20 minutes away where people are coming to your church. They're making that 20-minute drive, and there's a cluster of them. This is where you need to be looking for your first campus with the multi-site model. And the more, we're starting with the low-hanging fruit, okay? The more alike this community is to this community, the easier multi-site will be. I want to say all of that over again because I'm giving you the secret formula. This is the reason to sort of evaluate multi-site. If you've not launched a multi-site campus, this is the first place to start looking. If you don't have this, multi-site is probably not your strategy. Let me say all that over again and then I'll answer a question. You want to look for a cluster of people who are currently attending your church that are in that 15 to 30 minute zone where there's a community that's like yours. Those are the elements, okay? A cluster, it's not just one or two people, but a group of people, 15 to 30 minutes away in a community that's like yours. So if there's two clusters, and one demographically and socioeconomically and all of that kind of stuff is like your church's community, and one is very different than it, for your first launch, look at the one that's most like yours, okay? And we'll go into some of the reasons why in just a minute. Yes? Yes. Yeah, so what we often teach is once you've done the first one and you can do it, you've picked the low-hanging fruit, then you can try something harder. Or you can do another easy one. But here's what you would look at. You would then have the choice of going here, or this thing will now have its own 15-minute circle, and you can extend out from there. A lot of that's going to depend on how similar the community is around you, how urban or rural it is. Yes?
So it's really not a strategy to reach different and new frontiers of demographics.
That's right. That's right. I would say it's not the best strategy to reach, at your first launch, it's not the best strategy to reach different and new frontiers. Multi-site in its early stages is much more about taking something that we know is working and reproducing it in another area where we know it'll work. All right, and we'll talk about why in just a minute. Any other questions on this geography? It does, yeah, it does. Yeah, because what we're going to look at in terms of multi-site is this model of ministry. The benefit of multi-site is it's going to reproduce this model of ministry. It's not coming up with something from scratch, okay? So you're going to want to be in an area where there are already people who are a part of that ministry and who have the capacity to reproduce it. I'll show you why in just a minute.
Does it matter if the demographics of the people who are in the cluster are different between the two sites?
They won't be at first because you're going to send them from here. I'll show you the magic of it. Here's yes.
So what happens if they are within that 20-minute, within the center circle? If you choose to within that center circle.
Okay, great question. We'll answer that together. What happens if you launch too far away? Okay? There's none of your people involved. And generally, or most of the time, nobody up here will have any idea who you are. Here, you've already got people in your church who believe in your church and love your church, who are part of reproducing your church in this new location. So that we say multi-site is not going somewhere new. It's going somewhere you already are, because who's your church? It's these people. It's not a building, it's these people. So if you go too far away, you go beyond your reach or influence. What happens if you launch too close to where you are? You just go like across to the other side of the highway. This thing is going to be, for a season, a very small sort of expression of this one. It won't have everything that you have now. So if I'm here and this is hard, where am I going to go? If it's 5 minutes to here and 7 minutes to there, where am I going to go? I'll go right where I've been going for the last 10 years. Y'all with me? This is the secret zone. Geography is incredibly important to multi-site, especially on your first launch. Especially on your first launch. All right, I am going to need to erase this because we have a lot to cover. You guys are smart. I'd have been.
Be a different brother.
It's meant to be in Australia forever. I think they gave me a wrong kind of pen. It says whiteboard marker. Yeah, it's the board. All right. Well, we'll see.
Can I take it to the side and do it for you?
Yeah.
Keep talking.
All right. Big idea here, guys. Church planting. Let me ask it this way. If you were going to go 2 hours away, you have a wonderful opportunity there, a leader that wants to go there, and this is your first time to reproduce a congregation. What strategy should you use? Multi-site or church planting? Church planting. See how geography helps decide that? If you have, like to the question that was asked here, a very different community than yours and a leader that's really drawn to it and wants to go there and you want to send them, for your first one, should you use multi-site or church planting? Church planting, right? If you have a leader who wants to go 20 minutes away and fit with the model, but they want to reproduce, or they want to produce a different kind of church than yours, what should you use? Multi-site or church planting? Church planting. Y'all with me? Multi-site is a strategy that works when these things are present. Okay? You have the right gifting in the leader, the right geographical fit, it's the right distance away with some of your people there, that's where you need to be thinking about multi-site. That's when the strategy really comes alive. The rest of what we're going to talk about is how to launch it and how to lead it. But I don't want you guys to ever get into it if it's the wrong fit. If you have the wrong leader with different gifting or the wrong geography, or it's just a governance structure that you don't want to, this would be Mark Dever. He would say from a governance standpoint, he wouldn't want to do multi-site. It would be a biblical conviction for him. Y'all with me? Well, he doesn't need to do multi-site. And we would give him that permission. This is just a strategy. For you guys, though, if you want to help launch and lead something that extends the reach of your church, this is a wonderful strategy to do that when these things fit. Now, here's our sort of statistical comparison that I always want to offer as we do this. Church planting in America is getting better. There are things like Geneva Push that didn't exist 20 years ago that are assessing and resourcing church planters in ways that when I started didn't even exist. But even with all of that, it's still only about a third of church plants make it. It's a really, really difficult model. You got to go into an area and gather a core team and gather enough money and find a place to meet and to do all of that within the amount of time it takes to be self-sufficient and self-sustaining. It's incredibly difficult. Multi-site success rates for churches that follow this model is about 90%. Okay? And we actually help measure that a couple of different ways. One is in 3 years, it's still there. In other words, it didn't close in the first 3 years, it's still there. That's pretty good. 90% are still there. But we actually add another requirement onto that, which is, okay, you launched this thing 3 years ago, it's still there, but for you as the leader, would you do it again? And of the ones that are still there, 90% say, yeah, absolutely. We would do it again. So you can feel the success in that, right? Like Americans like success. Here's all I want to say is the model works. The model works. We're going to talk about how to launch it and whether the model's right for you in just a minute, but it works. And I just want you guys to hear that. All right, everybody clear on the difference in multi-site and church planting? Yes.
Can you have a church plant that looks a bit like multi-site?
You can. Yes, you can. Yeah, you can. All variations are possible. We see multi-site churches that launch campuses that they're going to continue to lead, one governance, but they do it like church plants. We see the reverse, which is what you're asking. We're just saying for the first one, do the easy one. This is preparing for. It's what we were talking about in the consult is, you guys are familiar with high diving in the Olympics? The Chinese win every year, or every year that I've ever watched. They don't win because they go off higher platforms. They win because the degree of difficulty for their dives is way above what we can do as Americans. So same, like we can't catch them, it's so hard. What we're saying about these, as you're preparing to lead a new congregation, don't try the highest degree of difficulty. Get the low-hanging fruit first and learn how to lead across multiple congregations that are similar and how it works for you guys and how it doesn't. So we sat in earlier because I wanted to hear one of these stories in Australia on Trinity in Adelaide. Paul Harrington, do you guys know Paul? Paul came to America, sat through a conference that I taught, and then was one of the reasons I was invited over here to come and teach. Paul's been doing this for a long time in Adelaide, and here's what he said. This is much, much slower than I like. It's much slower than I like. But it works. And I think that's part of what I'm wanting everybody to embrace. Don't think of doing 4 or 5 of these or the hardest ones or pioneering or any of those. If you're going to do this, do one, the low-hanging fruit, get it working, and then start thinking about reaching a city, a region, a diverse area. Y'all with me? Again, you can do those things through other leaders, but not through the multi-site model. Yep. Yes.
At the time we just go, well, actually they don't have the competencies to manage 2 sites.
Yes. And yes, it usually comes up at 3 sites. Almost all leaders that we interact with can do this at 2. At the mother church. Usually who they launch out is one of their favorite people. They have a lot of confidence in them. It works with 2. It's when you go to 3 that all the complexity starts to really weigh on the leader. And we see one of 2 reactions. One is, this is too complex. I don't like this. I want to launch all these things out as soon as possible. Okay, I just need to get rid of these. The other is, I want to control everything. Okay, and they start bringing, neither is healthy. There's a middle ground there. But we usually don't see that starting to pop up until the 3rd campus. So, yeah.
What are the plans of the church, what are they hoping to achieve? So talk about it as getting the low-hanging fruit.
Yes.
Theoretically, you've got them already. They're within your sweet spot. Are you hoping that they will begin to evangelize more?
Where's my marker?
Actively in the area?
Yeah, what you do when you launch on that sweet spot is this. They are going to have their own circle that will reach people in their 20 minutes that you wouldn't otherwise reach. That's the sweet spot.
There is an evangelistic edge to it.
Yes, there's a very evangelistic edge to it, yes. If we were going to establish this evangelistically, when you launch this or a church plant, you will reach way more people than you will with your existing congregations. New launches reach more people, baptize more people, put more people into service than existing churches. It's just a fact. And one of the reasons it'll work here is because you have a whole new mission field. Yeah, great questions, Joe. Great questions. All right, let's look at how to do it. You guys understand multi-site now, right? This is a we're going 30,000 feet very fast over multi-site. But I think you get the distinctions between it and church planting. We're all good with that? Both are good. Y'all, I'm a church planter. I've planted 2 that I love deeply. But I'm also a multi-site advocate. Both are good. How to launch. Here, I'm going to put these 4 things up, and we're going to summarize all of them fairly quickly. These are I gave you guys the secret formula, which is these G's, governance, gifting, and geography. And this just summarizes those realities in just a little bit different way. If we were to ask the most important question when it comes to multi-site, when we look at a campus 10 years after it's launched and ask, why does this campus look the way it does? Why is it the size it is? Why is it where it is? All of those big ones. Why is it working or not working? The most important question is, why did you do this in the first place? Okay? That's what you've got to settle when it comes to preparing and leading multi-congregations. Why are you doing this? Is the Lord leading you to do this? Is it an obedience thing? Is it a selfish motivation? Is it because it's somebody else is doing it? Do you have a burden for the city where you're going? Y'all with me? Why? That's the sustaining thing. And it will show through in what you eventually see out there. We all bear fruit, right? I mean, some of it's very healthy fruit and some of it's not. This needs to be the right motivation at the beginning, or we don't need to be engaging in reproducing. We would say it, in a family context, make sure you and your marriage are healthy before you start having kids. The why is incredibly important. The most important decision you'll make, especially as the mother church, is who you send. Okay, so why is the first one? Who is the second one? The most important question is why are you doing this? But then as you decide why and you get into those decisions, it's who. Who are you going to send to do this? You have got to send the right person, somebody that you trust, and if it's multi-site, somebody that wants to reproduce your church, not just a kind of church like yours. The biggest obstacle, any guesses as to what that is? This is across all the cultures we've ever worked with. Personality, that's a big one. Yeah, matching those up is hard. It's not the biggest though. Relational fallout. I would say that in personality. Yeah, it is. Chemistry is huge, but it's not the biggest one. This has been probably the dominant thing I've observed as I've been in Australia, the obstacles for the churches. A facility.
I would thought people will always feel more comfortable with the better resources.
Yeah. The biggest obstacle is finding a location and being able to afford it. That's the biggest obstacle we see for churches who want to go multi-site or committed to the model, they know where they want to go, is finding a location. So most of the time what churches do is they launch where? Say it. Yeah, I heard the S. Say it. Go ahead and say it. Schools, movie theaters, low-cost places. And what I've seen for churches that are doing that is there's a lid on how big you'll grow in those kinds of settings. 200-300 seems to be about right. And then and what we see in America, I don't know if this is as true here, but what we see in America when we're in portable locations is there's a drop in momentum at about year 2 or 3. People get tired of setting up. There's not a permanent, like 24/7 presence in the community. People in the community don't really know if you're going to be there long term because you feel portable and temporary. There's a lot of benefit that comes from finding a permanent location. So we recommend, it's okay to start in somewhere that's less expensive, but be thinking long term about a permanent location, and the sooner the better. That's the biggest obstacle we see, is location. And when you're in a place like Sydney, what would it cost to have a building like this one in Sydney? How much would this building cost? I mean, to buy it. Yeah, this one right here, yeah. $20 or $30 million, right? So that's all that stands between you and multi-site. It's just $20 or $30 million. That's all you need. Now, we would be talking much less scale than that. This would be the mother church, right? So where you would be going to reproduce can go into a school, can go into a portable kind of place like a theater. But I'm just saying it needs to eventually have a plan for getting into a permanent location. And that includes a lot of resources. Yeah.
How is that obstacle any different from multi-site compared to church?
It's not. It's not at all.
It sounds exactly the same.
It does. Yeah, I'm not drawing distinctions anymore. Yep. A lot of these would be just as true for church planting. But when you start down the road, I think you need to pick, is this a multi-site opportunity or a church plant opportunity? Then you sort of follow that up. Yep.
Is there somewhere in between where a permanent rental facility where you've got a facility a week is better than a school?
Yes, you can certainly stage into a permanent facility. I would say even a permanent office is better than just setting up and tearing down. Somewhere that the community knows that's them. Yeah, you got to get to that. Yep.
Associated with that is obviously the cost for size. You say they're moving away from multi-mega churches.
Yes.
What's the average in Australia you see? Where would you suggest, like you come up with the geography as an optimal thing? What's the optimal size to do that in Australia?
To start?
Oh no, to what you're trying to go to. If you're thinking I need to get a permanent place.
So it's been interesting for me. I've only seen, there's very few of the really mega churches like we have in America. As I've been around the country here, I've only seen a few though, even of the like 1,000, 2,000. There are very few of those. But the ones that have a building, really like the building that supports their ministry, seem to be 500 plus. And the ones that don't have a building seem to be around 200. Now that depends on the type of building, because a lot of the buildings that are available to you guys in Australia are the buildings that were built in like 1910, and they have 100 seats. You know what I mean? That's not a building that's conducive to a lot of what we're talking about. It's better than nothing. But that,
You were saying you're going to aim for building the year this, that's biggest obstacle, and you were planning in Australia. Where would you be aiming?
I've been asking myself this question, because in America I tell everybody 500 seats. Eventually get to where you can get 500 seats, and don't ever do any more than that. That's plenty to launch bunches of churches out from, 500 seats. Now it might take you 10 or 15 years to get there. That's okay, but be thinking that way. I'm very curious what I would do in Australia. I don't know if it would be that big, but I would want a building. Yeah. Yep.
Is it wrong just to aim for, when you said maximum 300, I reckon most of the sites usually go 100 to 150. It's part of
Yeah.
what I aim.
Right.
Is it wrong just to not aim for a permanent, so we're going to get to 150 and then just do it again, instead of aiming for something permanent?
No, it's not wrong. I just think my experience with that is it will eventually lose momentum. Yeah.
So it could max out, but then once it maxes out, it'll slow.
It will. Yeah, that's been my experience. Yeah. You guys are good at this. Good questions. All right, we'll keep going. The biggest obstacle, and I would say, I would add to that sentence, the biggest obstacle I've seen in Australia is a facility. I just see that almost every church I interact with has this challenge. It's like we're meeting in a school, we've been doing it for 8 years, we'd love to have a building, but it's too expensive or there aren't any. It just comes up over and over and over again. And the difference maker for multi-site really is geography. Churches who miss this one on their first launch tend to look back and go, I wish I hadn't done that. I wish I had launched that thing. Churches who get that right are the ones who typically look back and go, that was a great start, and I can't wait to do this again. So that's just a summary of what we've covered so far. Here is our biggest general principle. I'm going to put them all up there and then we'll talk through them. Launch strong. If you're going to launch one of these things, launch strong. I'm going to get from Paul Harrington at Trinity in Adelaide a graph that shows the 7 campuses that they've launched. They launched one of those campuses, just one, that had 100 people when they launched it. All of the others had 35 to 50 people. Okay? All of the ones that were 35 to 50 people are around 100 or so. I think there's one exception to that. The one that they launched with 100, guess how many it's at? 350. The size that you launch with is an enormous variable in what you end up with. Launch strong. Launch strong. And this is all these steps up here are designed to help you do that. Define success. What is it that we would say this worked, or this was something we believe in? This is what we would want to see happen if we do this. And be specific. Be specific around how many people and what kind of facility and all of those. Give yourself the freedom, the permission to be specific in those things. And then resource it for success. When we talk about how to launch, we sort of skip over this question of when to launch in multi-site, when you should even evaluate this. If you have the best opportunity in the world, but as a potential mother church, you're not healthy, you still shouldn't do it. Y'all with me? And what determines for us whether you're healthy or not is, do you have the margin to do this? Healthy churches have margin. All right? Healthy churches have margin. Now, I always get a lot of pushback on this, so come on. Yes? Yes? Yes, all of it. Every area of church. People, time, leadership, money, volunteers, attenders, you have some margin. In the multi-site world, if you don't have that kind of margin, what do you think my counsel would be to you as a pastor? Keep focused where you are. Keep focused where you are until you do have the kind of margin that it takes to reproduce a new congregation. We'll use the family context again. If I get married at age 19 as a student, I don't have a job, and we're pregnant, that child is going to have a very different upbringing than if I get married at 30 and I'm settled in my profession and we bring a child into the world. Y'all feel the difference in that, right? One's not wrong or right. They're just very, very different. I would say when you're given the choice on when to reproduce, that's what we're talking about as a church, when to reproduce a congregation. Do it when you have the margin in all those different areas. That's a big part of what we spent the 6 hours in our consult looking at, is giving you tools to assess, do I have the margin to reproduce as a church? And I would look, you named all the areas. Do I have the money margin? Do I have the people margin? Do I have the leadership margin? Do I have the volunteer margin to reproduce? Now, you won't ever have as much margin as you want. Okay? I just need to say that right up front. You won't ever feel like I can give all this away and I'll never even feel it. It'll still be painful. It's sacrificial to reproduce. But you will have enough margin. And here's the diagnostic on this. You want to be strong in 2 locations, not weak in either one. That's the key. We're saying launch strong and remain strong where you are. If you're going to weaken where you are to the point that it's not real sure whether it's going to make it, or you're going to launch something that you're not sure is going to make it, then multi-site is not the best strategy. Let's go here and then here.
So I'm currently in the position where I'm trying to convince the church of not doing the church plan.
Mm-hmm.
So the church plan I want to do is 9 minutes away.
Yep.
We have less than 20 adults with no margin. So are they all red flags to say?
All right, this is being recorded. Just show them this video. Don't do it. Please don't do this. You will regret it. Yeah, it's a bad idea. Guys, my theology is such that I believe God can do anything, can work through anybody. He's not limited by any of these strategies. So I never say never. I am the beneficiary of God doing something that went against every strategy out there. But part of my role is to offer the voice of experience and counsel. And what I did was incredibly hard. I mean, I don't know that I would recommend it as a way forward for anyone. And I think you can save yourself a lot of grief by I heard it say this. This is not a biblical proverb. I think it's just a life proverb. Experience is when you pay for your own lessons, and wisdom is when you let other people pay for those lessons for you. And I think you're getting the wisdom of a lot of churches that went down this road. Yep.
So you haven't seen benefits where people have had a constant stretching culture in church, where it's actually just, that's become the ethos of the church, and so people can come knowing that there's that big ambition. So, so maybe multi-site and then sending off and just keeping on doing it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So what I'm saying is, in some ways, cutting the margin much closer.
Yes.
That actually being beneficial for the church.
Do you guys know Guy Mason, City on a Hill in Melbourne? He was in our consult yesterday. We were talking through this kind of together, and we were talking about the distance away. And he was saying their church, they've launched 4 sites. Their church has learned that their sweet spot for them is where they go just far enough away that everybody who's a part of the launch feels like this isn't going to make it if I don't do my part. Y'all with that? It's not so close that we can just ride on the comfortable energy of the mother church, but it's not so far away that we're all worried about whether it's going to make it or not. It's just in that sweet spot where we need everyone in order for this to happen. So that, yes, absolutely.
So it's similar, how do you draw the line between creating a margin, which through basically ungodly ways, where we slack off, we do push people, versus creating margin in a way which is nonetheless seizing the opportunities which you've got and then.
Yeah, part of that's a hard issue. Part of it's vision. I think what we teach, America has probably more than maybe just about anywhere else I'm aware of, the ability to create margin through unhealthy ways. We deal with that with leaders a lot. We create margin because of ego or, it's a sickness. And this sort of strategy of multi-site will reproduce who you are. So if you're doing those kinds of things at your primary location, that's what you're going to reproduce as well. So what we would encourage those churches, this is why I said the most important thing is the why. If you're doing this because you're called by God to reach a city with the gospel, this is a wonderful strategy. If you're doing this because of selfish ambition, it's not. And I think, or you want margin to be comfortable, it's not. Now, I personally, in a consulting role, this is where I have to be a bit like the Apostle Paul. Y'all know what he said. Some people are preaching the gospel out of very pure motives. Some people are doing it very selfishly. Either way, the gospel's being preached. People are coming to faith. That's sort of how I have to settle myself with the American church sometimes. But I do think the most important thing to settle is, why would you do this in the first place? Why would you go about creating margin? Why? And then why would you give that margin away to a new site? Y'all with me? Both can be done for very pure reasons, gospel-centric reasons, or both could be done for very selfish reasons. And you've got to settle that in your own heart. That's why I was saying why is the most important question right up front. Okay? Where you would go from resourcing for success, where you're able to give margin to this thing, is through some very strategic planning processes. This is what most churches skip. This is what Paul Harrington was saying when he looked back, he wished he had done. It includes, I'm going to talk through IPOs and timeline. We're just going to do that very quickly. It also includes staffing and how to develop a core team. So let's do that really quick. We're getting into the how to launch this. Here's what we recommend. Take every ministry in your church, everything it is that you do, staff-led or lay-led or meeting or a gathering of any kind, and do kind of an audit. Like the IRS, if they audit expenses, they list every possible thing. Audit every ministry in your church. And then when you think about this new location, put every one of those ministries in one of these categories: I, P, or O. Initial means this is so core to who we are as a church, it has to be there on day one. P means it's a priority. As soon as we can have it there, we want to have it there. And O means it's optional. It doesn't really matter if it's there on day 1 or day 100. It's really, we're flexible on those kinds of ministries. So give me an example at one of your churches on what would have to be there on day 1. Preaching, right? It's got to be there on day 1. Now, should you use, this is the conversation of multi-site that I love. Should you do it live or video? Okay. Huh? Yes? Live, good. All right. Multi-site started with all video. Today, only 25% of churches in America use all video. Only 25%, 1/4. And most of those go back a ways to the ones that started it. More recently, there's been 25% of churches using a hybrid of live teaching and video. And that leaves 50% who do what? All live preaching. That's the vast majority. Okay? Yes?
Why the change?
I think the change is because of the diffusion of the model. If it started in big mega campus churches with sort of well-known pastors, then video was a very natural sort of tool to use. But as it's diffused through churches of all different sizes who don't have all of those resources or who have conviction around live preaching, you're starting to see that become the dominant form. So live preaching is now the norm. Most people don't think that, but it is. Live preaching is the norm. So preaching, that would be an example. Day 1, we have to have preaching. What else? Y'all, you know your churches. What else would you have to have there? Yes, how do you welcome people into the church? We'd have to have that day 1. What else? Singing. We're going to have music, right? And hopefully it's as good as what you have. What else?
You want to have embryonic structures there and mobilize.
Yes. Somebody does show up. Amazingly, somebody comes to your launch. What do you do? What do you ask them to do? We have to have some kind of pathway for them. Y'all with me? Those are initial day 1 things. Now, here's my question for you guys. This is a pop quiz on whether you understand multi-site. Do you have to come up with how to do those at the new site? No. You have to ask, how do we reproduce what we already do at the new site? Y'all with me? That's multi-site. You're not inventing the wheel. You're reproducing your wheel. Why do you reproduce your wheel? Because it works. You got a good wheel at your church. It's creating all this margin. You don't even know what to do with all the margin you're creating. So go reproduce that. Yes?
Do you do some of that pathway stuff together or apart or both, or it doesn't matter? So for instance, evangelism course or
Yes.
welcoming sort of integration course?
Yeah, you could do it all together. It'd be totally fine to do it all together. Yes?
So do a church, it's multi-site if it's working with another church. If
Right.
it's not working with another church,
Don't do it. Don't do it.
Church plant or reinvest.
That's exactly right. Yep. Yes. Don't do it. I'm saying that to the camera. Yes. It will be. It will be. Yes, and we'll get to that. It won't. You won't have. I don't know of any church that has the margin to reproduce the full scale of everything they're doing on day 1. That's why we're asking you to prioritize this. So give me an example of your churches that you would say, I'd love to see it there, but it doesn't have to be on day 1 for us to open. Summer mission. That's a perfect one. Okay? Yes. I mean, I think for me in America, children's on Sunday morning would be an absolute initial has to be there. Maybe students, I would say they could come to the worship service and we'll launch that when we can. Summer missions, y'all join in with us. We're already going. We'll launch it for you guys as we can. Y'all with me? Now you might make different choices on what has to be there or what could be sort of introduced over time. And then give me an example at your church that you wouldn't care if it was at the campus or not. It's just totally optional.
Midweek kids, playtime.
Yeah, like a lot of that will be facility driven. So if this place has a coffee shop and they're launching a campus, they would go, it's up to you whether you want to have a coffee shop. Y'all with me? It's just an optional thing, all right? This is real work to go through all of this together with the lead pastor and the campus pastor and audit all of the ministries and see which ones have to be there on day 1 and which ones are priorities. Now, when the lead pastor and the campus pastor disagree, who makes the decision on whether it's initial or priority or optional? Lead pastor. And if they disagree too much, what do you need to do? Church plant. Most do. That's the honest answer. But I'm saying, what do you need to do? Church plant. Yeah, church plant. Good job, guys. Very good. Now, timeline. We're going to do this very, very quickly so that we can at least cover just one little bit of the last piece. But all of these are the different elements that need to go into your timeline. Once you've identified the different ministries that are essential or that are a priority, then the question becomes not how to do them, but how to reproduce the ones you're already doing, how they're working. So what staff do you need in order to do that? What do those ministry plans look like? What does it look like to develop a team to do those things? If we need 2 children's ministry volunteers in every classroom and we want to have 4 classes, then how many volunteers is that? Y'all with me? All of that gets rolled in together to this timeline. And most people ask me, how long do you give to your timeline? 9 to 12 months. 9 to 12 months. We want you to, margin is a great thing when it comes to time. So we want you to have lots and lots of time. Now, churches that have done this before, they can launch in 3 months or 6 months. It doesn't have to take that long. But the first time you do it is really, really helpful to not be time pressured. So we recommend 9 to 12 months to pull all of that together. Yep.
It's 9 to 12 months from making a decision that you want to
That's right.
do this.
Yes. And here's the key part of how to use that 9 to 12 months. If your potential multi-site pastor is not currently a part of your church, they need to be there in your church for this 9 to 12 months. Okay? You don't just bring them in for the last 3 months and then send them out, because they won't reproduce you. You need to watch them for that year and see, do they really like our church and want to reproduce our church? And if they don't, what do? Not fire them. What do? Church plant them. Yes. And don't church plant them in your sweet spot. Church plant them 2 hours away, right? Good. Yes, sir.
Just logistically, if you're reproducing yourself, like Paul was talking about this morning,
Yes.
some of that stuff actually won't go with the reproduction. Will it?
That's right.
Ministry stuff will actually stay with the home church.
That's right. Yeah. Paul's a wonderful case study. They're going to put, if you weren't in his session, that's going to become a class for Geneva Push, and I highly recommend it for everybody. All I would say is, though, it's a 20-year vision. It's not a 1 year or a 2 year thing. He's been at this for a long time, and this is the way I would encourage all of you to be thinking about it. Yes?
Is it a good strategy for things to scale back a little bit at the mother church?
It usually forces that. It usually forces some simplification at the mother church. This process does. Because you start looking at things and you realize, why are we doing this on Tuesday night and Thursday night? Who started that? Let's just do that once. You get a lot more strategic at the mother church as well. Absolutely. All right, good. That's how to launch it. So you guys know you're now experts in when to do multi-site or when to church plant. And you now know to take 9 to 12 months to do multi-site and to bring your pastor into your church if he's not already there, to give yourself time to do this intense strategic planning and auditing and all of that. It's really hard work, but you got to do it. If you don't do it, you'll see in very short order that you should have done it, because it'll get too complex and diffused and all that. I want to show you now, though, a little bit on, once you've done it, how to lead it. And how to lead it well. We'll do 2 questions and then I'll jump into that. Yes and then yes.
Question on people audit. What are some leading indicators? Indicators where you say, okay, there's a bit of planting here. It's probably time to start thinking about it. What are some people indicators where you
So we recommend, and I was encouraged to hear Paul say that he uses Church Community Builder. This is a way to track everything that goes on in your church. And there are some healthy church metrics that CCB gives you to see how you compare and where you might have margin. So that would be the tool we would recommend. Church Community Builder. And if you tell them my name, you'll get a little discount. It may be like 1% or something, but you get at least a little bit. So, and there was another question behind you. Yes, sir.
So 9 to 12 months, there's obviously a cultural shift that needs to take place at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So I just think outside the world, here, whatever, does that change?
Does what change?
Does it change depending on whether it's an urban or a rural community?
No. No. It's same time frame. Yep. You can do all, here's how I would say this. It's about 3 to 6 months of work, my experience. I would want to give you 9 to 12 months to do it the first time through, so that you feel lots of more. It's like a big research paper and it's due in a week, or a big research paper and it's due in 6 months. Now don't do what we all did in school and wait till the last week to do it anyway. Use this extra time. You'll need it. Yeah.
Does that include recruiting the people?
That's what I'm going to get to now. Yeah, building, that last step that I had up there was core building. That's what we're going to talk through now. Yep.
What success have you seen in low socioeconomic areas? Have you seen this model run out of that kind of...
Here's what we've seen. I just met with, I don't know Ray's last name. Do any of you guys know Ray? Huh? Ray Galea. He's in way western. I guess they're still suburbs of Sydney. Very multi-ethnic church, lower socioeconomic demographic. He could do multi-site in another similar area like that. He is right now through Grant, right? Yeah. That's the key, though, is that you already know how to do it. Okay? If you're reaching a wealthy area with people who are very much like each other, and that's who your church is, and then you try to go to an area that's very diverse or socioeconomically diverse, you're going to struggle. Why? Because you don't know how to do it yet. So you remember, you want to pick the low-hanging fruit, right? That would be the answer. Yep. Okay, good. Core building. Here is the challenge of this. Remember margin. You want to have margin in terms of people. We would say, if I were giving you guys I hate to keep writing stuff on here that won't erase, but I need you to see this part. We'll all run out of here very fast. We don't even know who did this. The 10% rule when it comes to people. This is a diagnostic rule to help you stay strong in 2 locations and not weak in either one. So ask yourself this question. Can I send 10% of my people to a new location and it not weaken us too much where we are? And by sending 10% of my people to a new location, can I launch strong in the new location? Y'all with me? 10% on both sides. Can I send 10% and it not weaken me too much? And is 10% enough to launch strong there? Now, the number we would typically use for launching strong in the new location is about 100. That's where Paul's data was so affirming for me. Because when they launched with 100, remember what size it went to? 350. And when they launched with 35 or 50, it was always at or around 100. Y'all remember me sharing that? Here's the challenge. To launch with 100 people and that be 10%, how big does your church have to be? 1,000 people. And in this room, how many of y'all are 1,000? I've only met 1 or 2 so far since I've been here, so I'm fairly safe in asking this. So the question becomes, how much under 100 are you confident launching with and it being enough, okay, to launch strong? Where you're not going to launch it and be worried about is it going to make it or not. What we recommend to pastors is that they say, this would be you guys at the mother churches to your congregations, we have a wonderful opportunity to launch a new congregation in the next community over or 20 minutes away or however you describe that. We need a minimum of 10% of us who are willing to go and leave. This is the missional component to this. You're being sent by us as a church to this new community. And the first people we want to say yes to this call are the people who live in this community and attend our church. Y'all with me? We want you to help us create or reproduce our church for your neighbors there in a way that we've already done here. That's the first group we want. Now, anybody else in our church is also welcome to go. But we need at least 10%, and we need almost everybody who's from that area to be a part of this. And the best call I've heard to that, for that to a church was a pastor who said, I want to say it this strongly. This was his language to the church. If you live in this area and you attend our church, unless the Lord tells you not to go, I want you to go and be a part of this. Okay? Now that produced more than 10%. That's where you've got to evaluate the strength thing. But what I also loved about Paul's data, and I want to make sure I say this while we're talking numbers, and this is what we see over and over and over again in the States. You will take a dip at the mother campus if you send 10% or 15%. But by the end of the first year, it will be back to where it was before you launched the campus. And by launching strong, the new campus will be growing as well. Y'all with me? If that doesn't happen, then you didn't have enough margin to do this. All right, I saw like 3 questions, so we'll start here and work that way. Yep.
What's the average church size in America and Australia? I could give you, the average church size is a little bit misleading because it's top heavy, you know. These mega churches pull the numbers way up. Life Church had 126,000 people attend at Easter. So you just throw one of those in there and it covers, you know. But when you adjust for some of that disproportionate, it's about 75 is the average church size. You're talking about paying with 100 and needing 1,000, the average church is 70.
Yeah.
How does it work?
The average church doesn't need to go multi-site. Yeah, there's 320,000 churches in America and 5,000 multi-site churches. So it's a very small percentage of the whole. It's churches that are in a location where they've been able to produce margin and have enough health to do this. It's not a model for the average church of 75 or so. Great question.
I had 2 questions. When you said 100, is that 100 heads or like does that include kids or?
Everybody. Yep.
50, 60 adults.
Yeah, absolutely. Kids are people too. Yep.
Yeah. The other question was, I've heard that before as well, that when you lose something in another church, it seems to
It comes back.
Where does that come from?
Most existing churches are operating at the edges of their margin. The number of seats they have, the number of volunteers they have, and when you create more margin, more room, it fills up.
Like, is that the people who are already there being excited to call?
Yes.
Is that kind of
And that's part of the call. When you say, at the same time you say, I need everybody to go, you don't skip everybody that stays. You say to them, now if you don't go, here's our mission. All these people we're sending, create room for you to go and reach your neighbors with the gospel. And that's your mission. We're going to engage in that together. Yes?
Just one question, but one comment on the church size. Like, did you compare the average size of a church plant in America compared to Australia after 4 years? In America it was 200, Australia was 70.
Yeah.
So it gives a little bit of a range on that. My question is, given that we are going to really struggle to send a significant number at 10%, what would it look like to, let's say I sent James to do multi-site and we give 10%, like 30 people, something like that, and we said to him, raise another 30 people on that team or 40 people. What are the pros and cons?
When you're not sending large numbers of your own people, it's going to function more like what? A church plant. It's going to feel that way because they're going to be going into the community saying, hey, I'm James, I'm starting a church. There's 12 of us. We'd love for you to join. That's what church planters do. And it's not wrong. This is what we were saying earlier. There are hybrid strategies. You're just not going to get the benefit of the model the way you could. Yep. But it's okay to do it that way. Let's go here and then here. Yep.
Yes, along those lines, if you're going to a new community, there's always people in the community are looking for something that connects with them.
Yep.
So if 10% of 250 people is 25 people, you may bump that up to about, let's say, 30 or 40.
Yes.
Look at a good launch.
And we that's the other reason for the 9 to 12 months. So to the question in the back, say you were only able to send 20 or 30. Well, you might want to take a much longer launch horizon and say, let's start some groups in that area out here. Let's get those groups going where they're reaching people. Get 2 or 3 or 4 of those together. But again, it's going to launch much more like what? A church plant.
Y'all with me? That's using church planter strategies. And it's okay. It's absolutely okay to do that. But it would be a reflection to me of this isn't an area where we have a lot of margin. Yes?
So you're calling that a little bit more like church plant, but presumably you could do that with the same government.
You could.
As well, which would strengthen.
Yep.
Even though it's not technically.
Yeah, you would. It would be like offering ultra supporting covering to a church planter. That's what that would function like.
But it would require different gifting.
It would. It would. Yeah. You guys get this. I mean, the questions y'all are asking, when do I use this model? When do I use this model? It's good.
I just wanted to push back on your use of the Trinity figures. It seemed to me that their increase in terms of the number of years in which they doubled or tripled in size from the initial launch was no different for the churches that were under 100. It's
Yeah.
50.
The percentage I would agree with.
It doesn't seem to me that it's as necessary as you seem to be suggesting to
Yeah.
start at 100 at 10%.
The percentage increase was the same. I agree with you. But where they ended up was very different. And when they started small, 100 seemed to be the limit. When they started large, started strong, it went way beyond that. And that's the point. That's what we see in America as well.
So it's for church plans, the same principles. You can aim for 100 with margin.
Yes. Yep. Either way. Yep. Good. Yep. Yes.
So if you wanted to start with 100 people and the church was feeling a little like the margin isn't quite going to
Yep.
there, and they wanted to get, say, 20% of the core team from neighbouring churches.
Yep.
Now that's obviously going to upset the culture a little bit of the church.
It is.
Is that something that you see working properly?
Yes. It can work. It can work. But all of these, like I would put all of these questions into the category of, could you do it this way? And I would say yes. Just the degree of difficulty is going up. Can you launch with 30 people? Yes. Can you launch further away? Yes. Can you partner with other churches? Yeah. Y'all with me? It's going to be harder. So this is where I think you've asked a great question. If the average church size is 75, then this probably isn't a strategy, a margin strategy that most of those are going to be employing. So this is what I'm asking. A part of your preparing for and leading multiple congregations is, do I have margin? Is that where God's calling me? I've seen very faithful congregations of 75 that don't need to do this. I'm actually helping lead one right now. We don't have multi-site anywhere in our vocabulary because we're reaching out to immigrant communities that are very transient, that aren't going to be a part of our church for very long. The idea that we would ever have margin or any time in the foreseeable future is just off our radar. Y'all with me? So we're not going to be multi-site in that congregation. But when you're talking about a reproducing church strategy, a growing church strategy, where there is margin, this is a way to consider reproducing, okay? And you guys are really, I think, fully understanding some of the model. All right, we'll just very quickly, I think I've just got a few minutes left. Yeah, just 5 minutes. Thanks for hanging in there with me. I'm going to put all these up there, and then we'll just say, I think I have one more line. Yeah. These are the tensions of multi-site. At your campus and at the campus you would launch, you're going to have to navigate all of these tensions and 100 more. All right, and since I've only got 5 minutes, I don't have time to go through all of these, but this is where somebody who launches out from your church, who doesn't want really fully to reproduce your church, they just want to kind of do their own thing, this is where you'll feel that, okay? And what you've got to navigate to lead multi-site on the front end is, it's not if, it's when you feel these tensions, how do they get resolved? Y'all with me? When, not if you feel them, but when you feel these tensions, how do they get resolved? And here's the answer. You've got to land in one of these places. You have got to land in one of these places on the front end. On the far left means central decides. The mother church, when those tensions come up, and they will. On the front end, some churches say, the mother church is going to decide how we resolve these tensions. On the far other end, some churches say, The campus decides. Now, which one of those is right? Neither's right. They're both right. It's which one you land on, all right? And which one you can consistently go back to. Some will say there's a better approach where we agree. We're always going to seek to agree at Central and at our campus. We always want to agree. And that's going to be our approach for resolving these tensions. Or, like if I'm the lead pastor and you're the campus pastor, I'm going to decide it, but I'd like your input before I do, every time. Or the reverse. You can decide all these tensions, but I want you to hear from me before you do. Y'all with me? If you leave this until the back end to decide, you won't lead multi-site well. You've got to decide this on the front end. I put all those tensions up there. I could list another 100 that are going to be a part of leading across more than one location. And the essential piece to this is deciding on the front end how those get resolved. Okay? If you don't do that, everybody's going to be frustrated, and I'll be back here in 5 years, and you guys will be calling mother churches Death Stars and all that. So my job will have been a massive failure. I don't want churches to go multi-site before they have margin and before they're ready, but I also don't want churches to go multi-site without taking these steps and being clear on how the tensions that are inevitable are going to get resolved. Y'all with me? Be clear about one of these. I think one of the things that I've been most sort of taken by as I've been in Australia is I was joking with somebody, and I'm going to close with this. We were, like in America, we rebel against authority. Unless we're the one with authority, then we love it. I mean this. Like, we have no problem if we're the one in authority. We love authority. Then everybody rebels against us. In Australia, you rebel against authority even when it's you. Like, you guys don't like authority even when you have it. And I'm still struggling to understand this. So here's what I want to say. In the multi-site model, you can't do that. You have to step in and embrace what it means to lead with authority and provide clarity. You have to do that in the multi-site model. And your leadership actually has to be strong enough to carry across more than one location, or it won't work. So whatever that syndrome is that causes everybody to sort of shrink back from that, this is my one bit of consulting advice. It's as biblical as I can make it. You have to get over that if you're going to use this model, okay? I'll hang around if you have any questions. I realize this isn't for everyone, but I do think you're leaving here with an appreciation of what it is, and I hope it gives you some prayerful kind of decision-making opportunities in the future around whether to deploy this or not. That's been my hope and my prayer for us together. So thank you all. It's been wonderful.